Recording going. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jasper. I'm from SCORE, Maine, and welcome to our webinar on the Maine Technology Institute and grants and programs for your business. We're joined by Tom Kittredge, who will be presenting today. He is now one of Maine's 40 under 40, so congrats to him, as well as a expert on the topic here. And SCORE ourselves are free mentoring for any stage of your business, and we are a partner of the SBA and sponsored by the Maine Technology Institute. Tom, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. Nice to see everyone. My name's Tom Kittredge. I'm a senior investment officer at Maine Technology Institute. I've been doing these presentations with SCORE probably for about 2 years now. So a good amount of experience. And I'll say that generally my presentation takes between 20 to 30 minutes, and then there'll be lots of times for questions and answers at the end if folks have any questions. So I'll kick us off.
Yeah. All right.
So Maine Technology Institute, we are a nonprofit primarily funded by the state of Maine, whose mission is really to grow Maine's economy through supporting innovation in the state. So the hope really being that by providing resources and primarily financial resources, but also some other services to businesses that are engaged in innovation, that will allow them to grow their business, take some risks, hopefully maybe hire some employees, and create economic impact for Maine people. So again, really innovation as a means to economic impact is what MTI exists to do. So just a very brief history of MTI. So we were founded in 1999 by the legislature. I believe Angus King was the governor at the time. And in the late 90s, Maine, I think, was either last or second to last in the nation in terms of investing in research and development. And the state at the time perceived that, for Maine to be competitive in the 21st century, that they really wanted to invest in some certain sectors, and I'll speak to those sectors. So MTI was created along with our sister organization, the Maine Venture Fund, to really invest in some targeted sectors with the hope that those sectors would be key drivers of Maine's economy moving into the future. And you can see here, as of 2005, we had funded 500 projects. That number that says 202, I'll make sure to update that. That should be as of 2022, so a couple of years ago. We invested over $300 million in Maine organizations. That's both money that came to us from the state, but also money that came to us through, for example, investing in businesses, as an equity investor and receiving a return that we were then able to put back out the door. So scope of MTI funding. So I like to show this slide just to give a sense that MTI really works with businesses all along their growth trajectory. So we work with businesses who are really just in the earliest stages of having an idea, maybe not even having a prototype yet or an MVP, all the way to companies that have been in existence for decades, but maybe have created a new product that's innovative and distinct and are looking for support to roll that out. So we really work with businesses at every kind of stage of their growth. As long as they kind of meet the other criteria for MTI support, which I'll go into, but things are like innovation and economic impact. So the bulk of what I'm going to focus discussing today is what we call MTI Business Innovation Funding. Internally, we call it core funding because it's the bulk of what MTI does. But business innovation funding is really funding available for businesses who are engaged in innovation, as the title suggests. So those are grants, loans, and equity investments. And they're really focused on helping grow and develop and scale new products, new devices, new methods that are innovative and have the potential to help a business grow in a way that's going to create that economic impact that I keep touching on. So the key requirements that MTI looks at when it comes to business innovation funding. The first is shared goals, and that's another way of saying economic impact. So is the business looking to grow here in the state of Maine? Are they looking to, create new jobs, grow their revenues, attract investment capital, develop physical facilities in the state? We're looking to see really a desire for growth and scaling, not a business that's kind of just wanting to stay where they already are. Innovative and forward thinking. So again, that's really that question of, is there something that's innovative? And I'll touch on what we mean by innovative in a moment, but really something that's distinct and novel and unique from what's already out there. Maine-based organizations, and I'll go into what we mean when we say Maine-based, because that's actually a surprisingly nebulous question. seven targeted technology sectors, and then one-to-one access to matching funds. So just to go a little deeper into each of these different categories. So economic impact potential, some of the metrics we look at are the creation and retention of quality jobs statewide, growth and acceleration of revenues, attraction and leveraging of additional capital or other investments, and then also indirect economic impact. So indirect economic impact could be things like, are you purchasing from Maine-based suppliers? Are you selling to Maine-based customers? Are you partnering with Maine-based organizations? Is your business something that has a really profound environmental or societal positive impact? So maybe you're, creating, doing research into curing cancer or something that has a very clear societal impact that has additional merit. I will note that with indirect economic impact, that in and of itself generally isn't sufficient to kind of meet MTI criteria. You need to have some of those things listed above, but it definitely helps bolster an application. So Maine-based organizations. So the reason I say this can be a little bit of a nebulous, hard to define is as folks know, especially since COVID, remote work has become a very large thing. And we frequently support companies that have some employees based in Maine and some employees based in other parts of the nation or even other parts of the world. Or we have companies come to us that have two founders. One founder is Maine-based and one founder is in Boston or something. So when MTI thinks about Maine-based, we take kind of the whole picture to make a judgment. And kind of look at a variety of different factors to make a judgment of whether or not a business qualifies as Maine-based. The fact that most of you are on a SCORE webinar hosted by the state of Maine probably is a good sign that your businesses are Maine-based, but a few things that we look at. So first, it's just registered Maine business, and that's a criteria for all of our businesses. And that just means that you have to have signed up with the Maine Secretary of State's Bureau of Corporations, and basically filed that you're a business operating in Maine. And that's for tax purposes. It's a very easy thing. You just go online and you register. So that's one component, and that's a requirement across the board. But then there are some other requirements that are, that's where we kind of look at things as a whole. So the things we look at are, does the organization have a physical headquarters in Maine? Whether key decision makers for the organization are based in Maine. So the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, the founders or any, folks in the kind of C-suite. What's the ratio of full-time employees in Maine to other parts of the country or other parts of the world? And then also just a question of where does the company publicly identify as being headquartered? So on your website, does it say Maine or does it say somewhere else? So we take all of that into account when we're kind of assessing whether or not a business is Maine-based. We also are able to do some initial work with businesses that aren't based in Maine, but are planning to relocate to Maine. So sometimes a business is planning to relocate to Maine and is interested in applying for MTI funding. And we're generally able to work with them and decide whether or not they'd be able to get funding from MTI, but we're not actually able to put that money out the door until they demonstrate that they have fully relocated to Maine. So that's helpful for companies who are maybe considering relocating and want to know whether or not they're eligible for MTI funding. But again, we're not actually able to put that money out the door until they demonstrate they're Maine-based. So innovation. So this is kind of one of the key elements to MTI, this innovation component. And the way we think about it is, does the organization have an innovation that has the potential to scale and is meaningfully differentiated from existing alternatives in the market? So those two, potential to scale and meaningfully differentiated, are both key. So by potential to scale, we're looking for an innovation that is meaningful enough that it's going to allow a business to grow. It's not something that's really niche, that's going to be, a very small improvement and that doesn't actually really change the overall trajectory of the business. And meaningfully differentiated just means that it's not a small incremental improvement on something that's already out there. It's something that's different enough that it gives you a competitive advantage in the market and again, allows you to scale. So ways you can demonstrate that include customer discovery, market research, a review of existing intellectual property. Those are all ways you can kind of demonstrate that your product is innovative. In terms of the 7 targeted technology sectors that MTI supports, those are biotechnology, composites and advanced materials, environmental technologies, forest products and agriculture, information technology, marine technology and aquaculture, and precision manufacturing. Um, a couple things to note in this area. So one is MTI takes a very broad view of each of these 7 sectors. These were defined in the late 90s originally, but obviously a lot of these sectors have transformed radically, over the past 25 years. For example, information technology, folks weren't talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning or anything of that nature at that time. So we purposely keep a very broad definition of each of those sectors to try to be as inclusive as possible, and also to try to recognize that new technologies are constantly emerging. But if you want to get a better sense of what we mean by those sectors, you can go on our website, and there's a web page dedicated to each of the sectors. But again, we try to take an inclusive view. We're also interested less so in what sector the business defines itself as, and more as to what the innovation itself is. So a good way to think about that is, if you are a company in the hospitality industry, which is not an MTI targeted sector, even though it's an important part of Maine's economy, that the business itself doesn't fall in those sectors. But if you have created a platform and you can demonstrate that that platform is innovative and distinct, and creates a meaningful opportunity for the business to scale substantially, and maybe you even plan to sell this platform to other users, that would qualify as information technology, even though the business itself doesn't necessarily fall in that sector. So again, we're really interested in which of those sectors does the innovation fall. And also, I should note, it's also very common for organizations or innovations to fall in multiple sectors, and that's obviously totally fine. And then the last criteria I'll mention is access to matching funds. And this is actually true. So most of those criteria I've spoken about are key to that business innovation funding program that I've been talking about. Access to matching funds is true for all MTI programs across the board. And basically what that means is MTI is looking for a minimum of 1-to-1 match for any funding we put out the door. So if you come to MTI and you say, hey, I have a project that's going to help me move an innovation forward, and it's going to cost, let's say, $40,000, MTI could put up to half of that, so $20,000, and then the other half would have to come from matching funds. So those matching funds could be from the founder's personal funds, from outside investors, from a bank loan, from a line of credit or a credit card. We're fairly agnostic as to the source of matching funds. There's a few very rare exceptions where basically that money is also money coming from the state of Maine, as in the government, the state of Maine, that we're not able to accept as match. But for the most part, we're quite flexible with the source of matching funds. And then you can see down at the bottom here in italics, for smaller requests, MTI can generally accept a portion of the match as the unpaid labor of the founders. So basically what that means is, if you're a really early stage company, let's say you're not generating any revenue yet, and you're a founder and you're putting a lot of time into the project that you're proposed to MTI, and you're not being compensated for that, MTI can look at that and say, well, if you were hiring somebody to do this, you'd be paying them X amount of money. So rather than requiring you to hire somebody to do this, if you're doing it yourself, we can kind of consider that the value of that match. But as you see at the bottom, that should generally be no more than 30% of the request of the match. So, very simple math. If you have a $20,000 project, if you're asking for $10,000 from MTI, 3,000 of that, the match could be in-kind sweat equity, and then the other 7,000 would need to be cash match. So this just emphasizes that MTI funding scales with you, and that the amount of funding you're eligible for MTI is going to differ depending on how far along your business is. So we look at 6 different areas to determine where a business is in its growth trajectory, and I'll touch on those in greater depth in a moment. But a very early stage business, let's say a business that has an idea that it can demonstrate as innovative, hopefully has some form of validation of the idea through having talked to potential customers or having done some market research, but maybe doesn't even have a prototype or a minimum viable product yet, they would be eligible for range 1 MTI funding, which is up to $25,000 in funding. Let's say not only do you have an idea, but you have a working prototype, a working minimum viable product, and you've tested it with potential customers, but you don't necessarily have sales yet. Then you might be eligible for up to $50,000 in cumulative MTI funding. and then so on. So the next range is range 3. That generally means that you've demonstrated that you do have sales of your innovation. That's up to 250,000 from MTI, and so on. Um, One thing to mention that's particular to this range 3 number, that 50 to 250,000, MTI is a cumulative lifetime grant limit of 100,000. So what that means is if you are a business and you are receiving multiple grants from MTI, once you hit 100,000 in total grant funding, MTI is no longer able to put out additional grant funding, but we can put out funding in the form of loans or an equity investment. So an equity investment being us, basically purchasing a portion of your company, and then if you sell your company, then that money comes back to MTI, and we then put it into our pool funding. We're able to put out into the ecosystem, and then a loan being exactly what it sounds like. We're able to give you a loan, and then over time you repay us, and again, then that's money we're able to put back out. But yeah, the cumulative 100,000 grant limit, it's the max amount of grant funding. Generally, folks hit that through multiple grant awards. So maybe you get a $25,000 grant award, you successfully achieve that project, you come back to MTI and receive follow-on funding, maybe another 25,000, achieve that, and then tap into a remaining $50,000 grant. So you hit that 100,000 through 3 different grants, but that's kind of the norm. So in terms of the application process, so the first thing to do is submit an interest form via MTI's website. So if you go into our website, you go to the business innovation page, you'll see a link to submit an interest form. And basically what submitting an interest form does is it allows you to set up a meeting with an MTI representative. So either myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll spend an hour chatting through your business and your innovation with you and trying to get a really good sense of whether or not you're likely to be eligible for MTI support. And that's basically to make sure that you don't put in all the work of applying for MTI funding only to find out that you're not eligible and it was a waste of your time. We want to position people to be likely to be successful if they are going to put in all the work of submitting a request. If you are invited to apply, which means if we determine that you are likely to be eligible, we'll ask you to prepare a few different documents. So one is a scope of work form, and that's really just saying, hey, what is your project? What is this project that's going to move your innovation forward? What are the key activities within that project? What are deliverables linked to each of those activities? And what's a rough timeline for completing those activities? It's very common for an MTI funded project to have multiple components to it. So for example, let's say you're a really early stage business. Maybe one of your key activities, as we call it, is getting to a minimum viable product, getting to a prototype. And that's one of them. And then another one, a separate one, is filing for a patent. And then maybe a third one is conducting some additional customer discovery. And those would each be key activities, and then you'd have deliverables linked to each of them. So for developing the minimum viable product, it might be the key features of the product that are going to be achieved so that it's viable. For the IP key activity, it might just literally be filing for your provisional patent. And then for the customer discovery, you might say, I'm going to meet with 20 prospective customers to get feedback on my idea and get a sense of whether or not they'd be interested in purchasing this product and how much they'd be willing to pay for it. So that would be the project, the scope of work form. The second is the budget form, and that's really just asking you to list all the expenses that you anticipate being associated with the project. So let's say, again, taking that example, maybe you're hiring an engineer to do some of the work on your developing the prototype. So that would be one of the lines. And you're hiring a IP lawyer to do the patent. That would be another expense line. And then a third line is actual, you need some hardware to purchase. So that's another line, and so on. And then also you're listing, here's how much I'm requesting from MTI, and then here's how much I have in matching funds, and this is where the matching funds are coming from. So the matching funds are coming from myself and my co-founder. That's the budget form. And then the last document is the application form, and that's just asking you to touch on a few different things. So what is the economic impact potential of your business? And that basically asks you to look, where are you now and where do you see yourself 3 years from now as a business in terms of how many employees you hope to have, in terms of what sort of revenue you project having, and a few other areas. The second is a team. So who are the key team members? That includes both employees and founders, but also if you have outside mentors like folks from SCORE, if you have advisors, if you have key consultants or contractors, you touch on them there. The innovation is really just what is your product? Why is it innovative? How is it differentiated from what's else already out there in the market? And also, hopefully, you've talked to some prospective customers and can say, here's customer discovery I've done to validate that there's interest in this product. Next section is market. So that's just asking you to kind of quantify the size of the market opportunity. So you might say, oh, I've done market research. And again, this is a great area for SCORE to help you with if you've never done market research before. But, I've done some market research and I can, demonstrate that in the United States, the market for buying, let's say you're inventing a new diaper market is $20 billion a year, and it's growing at X rate. That would be the market information you're including. And then the last section is the business model. So really just how do you plan to be a profitable business? So what is your revenue model? Do you sell directly to consumers? Do you sell to other businesses? How much do you plan to sell for your product? What are the key expenses associated with your product? And really just kind of demonstrating this is roughly how we as a business plan to get to profitability if we're not already there. And then, so you'd submit all those forms, it would get reviewed by MTI's team, and then generally funding decisions take between 1 to 4 months, generally around 2 months is the average time. And then assuming you are approved, the funds are dispersed pretty promptly, generally within a week of approval. And then MTI has ongoing reporting requirements. If you receive a grant, all the reporting requirements generally are, it's just at the end of the grant, at the end of the project, we ask you to submit a final report to us saying how it went and documenting your expenses. If you receive a loan or an equity investment, there's some more in-depth reporting requirements. Basically, we check in with you once a quarter, but that's only for loans and equity investments. So when is a good time to contact MTI? And by that, when is a good time to submit an interest form to us? Here are kind of the key elements that are helpful to be able to discuss when you reach out to MTI. So what is the problem you are addressing? So basically the idea is presumably if you're selling something, you're selling it for a reason, and that's because your customers want it. So what problem do your customers have that you have a solution for, essentially? Second is innovation and how is it differentiated from existing options? So, why is what you're doing better than what's already out there effectively? And why are people more likely to buy what you're offering than what's already out there on the market? Customer discovery they have conducted to date. So by customer discovery, we really mean, have you talked to folks who might be interested in your product? So, people kind of in your target customer segment, to get feedback on whether or not the problem you think they have is real and that the solution that you have is actually a value to them. And also maybe, how much would they be willing to pay for that product? Ideally, these people you're talking to would be strangers. It's tempting sometimes to ask friends or family. It's more comfortable to ask them, but obviously they're more incentivized to kind of tell you what they think you want to hear. So, it's better to talk to strangers, ideally, in person or via survey, ideally in person or via something where you get more detailed answers. Sometimes people just do an online survey, and that is of some value, but the more you can kind of dig down in those conversations, the better, we tend to find. The team with complementary skill sets. So MTI generally prefers to fund organizations that have more than one team member. So, multiple co-founders, or if it is a single co-founder, then hopefully they have some other employees or some other folks involved. If you are a single founder and no other employees, that's okay. But if that's the case, we like to see that you have a strong support network. So that could be advisors or mentors, but really people who are invested in helping the business succeed. We've just found that businesses tend to be more successful when the founder is not totally alone in the trenches and when they have people to bounce ideas off of and who have complementary skill sets. The competitive landscape and market opportunity. So, the competitive landscape, who are your competitors? And again, going back to that question of differentiation, what do they offer and why is it not as good as what you offer effectively? And then the market opportunity, again, what is the size of the market and why is there potential for this to be a real business? And then lastly, the resources they will need to move the innovation forward. So how are you going to keep moving the innovation forward? Part of that is through MTI fundings, but that comes down to that question of matching funds and other resources you need to keep moving the innovation forward. Whew. Okay, so that's basically everything there is to say for now about business innovation funding. And I'm happy to take questions. Folks often have questions about whether or not they're a fit in terms of innovation or in terms of sector. I'm happy to tackle those as best I can. Often my answer is going to be it's best to just set up one of those calls with an MTI representative because often it's helpful to really get in depth and ask a bunch of questions. But I'm happy to kind of tackle those to the best I can on this webinar. Before we get to Q&A, though, I'm just going to quickly touch on some other MTI programs that are relevant for folks to know about. So those programs, some of the other programs that folks should be aware of that MTI offers. So one of them is called the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps. And basically what that is it's a vetted network of consultants that can provide short-term consulting work that MTI is able to help provide some funding for. So basically, if you're a business and you have a consulting need, let's say you need to hire a consultant for 3 months, and that consultant is going to help you figure out your HR handbook, or they're going to help you make a sales and marketing plan or whatever it is. We're quite open. MTI is a network of consultants, all Maine based, and basically they would apply to become part of this network. And MTI is able to provide up to half the funding to fund that consulting work, up to $15,000 from MTI. And that's funded through the domestic trade program. So it's separate than business innovation funding. It doesn't count towards that $100,000 cap that I mentioned earlier. So I would recommend that if you specifically have consulting work, and I should really emphasize it's consulting work and consulting work alone, to explore the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program. Also, if you're planning to work with a Maine-based consultant, but they're not part of the network, you can recommend that they apply to become part of the network. And then, if they're accepted, then they could be the person you work with, and MTI funding could go towards that. The second is event sponsorship. So this is generally funding available for nonprofits, occasionally for profits, but generally it's nonprofits or industry associations that are hosting an event that celebrate, champion, and educate Maine's innovation economy. So for example, MTI sponsors a number of SCORE events because that's really aligned with the work we do, and we're able to provide some funding for those events. Federal funding technical assistance program. So that is free expert guidance for folks who are applying for federal grants. So if you're not aware, the federal government has a ton of money available for research and development. And basically I think there's 13 perhaps government agencies that have funding set aside for research and development in their kind of fields. So for example, the Department of Energy or the Department of Transportation or the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Defense, they all have pools of money set aside for research and development that might benefit their kind of spaces. Generally, those are available through 2 programs called SBIR and STTR. So small business innovation research, I think it is, and then small tech transfer is the other one. To help folks apply for those, because that grant process can be quite complex, MTI has a roster of internal experts on those programs who are able to meet with your business and provide advice and guidance on applying for those federal grants. Just to emphasize, those grants are generally for really high risk research and development. So that's funding that the government is looking to put out for ideas that are totally unproven, that may fail, but that have a high potential. So that's, generally they're for businesses that have not commercialized yet, who are doing something pretty early stage and need to do additional research and development work. And then lastly, entrepreneurial support organization funding. So MTI has grant funding available for other organizations, generally nonprofits that support Maine's entrepreneurial economy. So again, SCORE would be a perfect example of an organization that we would be able to support. The Rue Institute, Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, Dirigo Labs, Upstart Maine. There's a variety of institutions across the state that MTI provides funding for because they help support innovators and entrepreneurs. And that is that, exactly 30 minutes. Well, great. I'd be happy to take any questions folks might have.
Yeah, on the dot. We'll start off with David. David has a question. If my company is registered in Maine and their 3PL is in Maine, would that make them eligible? No one from the team is in Maine currently.
Unfortunately, that would not be eligible if no one from the team is within Maine. We're less concerned about where a business is registered and more with where the team, where the business, where the actual employees are based. It's very common, for example, for MTI to fund companies that are registered in Delaware. That's a very popular space to register a company. But if the founders and the team are primarily in Maine, we're able to fund it. But David, if you relocate to Maine, or if you have a number of employees in Maine, then you might be eligible at that point. But at the point where you have no one based in Maine, you would not be eligible, unfortunately.
Information to have. We'll go Elizabeth and then Kathy. Elizabeth is wondering, what if there was previous funding that they've begun using towards their business? Could that count as the one-to-one?
Unfortunately, no. We can't accept basically previous expenditures, which is a shame. It's a very common question. Basically, you need to put forth a project proposal to MTI that's future oriented. So you're saying this is work that has yet to be done, and I'm planning to do this work. And then, the matching funds would come as payment towards that project. So unfortunately, you could not use money that has already been spent. The one thing I should note on that, though, is the application process, as I mentioned, can take 2 to 3 months. If you want to, during that 2 to 3 month span while your application is under review, if you start spending some of the matching funds during that window, we can generally accept that as matching funds, but that's after you meet with an MTI representative.
All right, good to know. Kathy, take it away.
If you have an untried but innovative idea for a business and you want to, I'm trying to lower my hand. If you want to apply for funding for that, can you apply for all of those other ones that you mentioned that you said are generally for nonprofits if you're going to start an LLC?
Okay, so I'll take the second part of that first. The ones that are generally specific to nonprofits most commonly, and they're not specifically required, event sponsorship and entrepreneurial support organization funding. So an example I'll give is there's an organization in Portland folks might be aware of called the New England Ocean Cluster. They are a co-working space, and they also run a variety of programs that support entrepreneurs and innovators. They are a for-profit program, but because they, have a variety of programs that support entrepreneurs and innovators and uplift the innovation economy, they're eligible for funding. However, if you're just a business that isn't running that sort of programming or those sorts of events, you probably wouldn't be eligible. And then in terms of the part about, you having a business that's innovative, but really early stage and you're looking to fund it, you could potentially be eligible for business innovation funding, despite the fact you're very early stage, as long as you can demonstrate that you've done some research to validate that the innovation has real potential. And by research, I mean, have you talked to prospective customers? And also, have you done some market research to get a sense of whether or not there's a real market for what you're looking to do?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
Do you have a phone
Tom?
number? Do you have a phone number for sorry.
Yeah, let me I'll post my I would recommend going by my email, just because I'm frequently in meetings, so you might miss me, but I'll post my number in the chat as well, and I'm posting my email right now. And then actually, Jasper, you send around the slides and also the recording as well, correct?
I do. I include contact information for presenters
Oh,
in
good.
my follow-up email. So I'll include it. I'll include your contact info as well as the slides and the recording here in the email I send shortly after this.
Appreciate that.
Of course. All right. Tom, is there any particularly interesting cases you could share that's come across your docket recently?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think. We also, because of our confidentiality requirements, I have to be careful here.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'll speak. I mean, so some of the I'll speak broadly to some of the sectors that we're really seeing a lot of work in. Aquaculture is one where there's been a tremendous amount of movement lately, especially in like bioplastics. Folks looking to make innovative products from kelp or from lobster shells or all sorts of interesting things where people are looking to take that and make more environmentally friendly products is an interesting example. Lots of stuff, as you would imagine, in the artificial intelligence space, utilizing AI for a variety of different products. We're working with a company right now called Blue Shift Aerospace that folks might have heard of. That's looking to basically launch rockets in Maine, launch satellites into space, and they're looking to develop a facility up north. And they use biofuels to do that. So it's, again, more environmentally friendly, all sorts of different things. So, really, we fund a very broad array, I would say, of companies in the state. So it's very exciting work.
Awesome. That's, both MTI and SCORE seem to always have some interesting, requests come through. Kathy, one more from you?
Yeah. Do you guys happen to have a list of people that might be interested in getting involved in new business, like being partners or being, kind of like, I don't watch TV, but I know there used to be a show on there where people would go in and they'd tell their idea, and then the panel would give them so
like
much money for what?
Shark Tank or something like
Oh,
that.
is that what it was called? Yeah.
I
I
think so,
remember
yeah.
seeing it a couple of times. No, I just wondered if you had like a list of people that, or if you ever do get a list of people that are interested in investing in new companies when they hear the idea that they feel like it's a winner. Is there such a thing?
We don't. There's an organization out there to put on your radars called Maine Angels. An angel investor, similar to kind of the folks on Shark Tanks. They're basically wealthy individuals who invest in companies because it's something they're passionate about. And Maine Angels is kind of a consortium of these people. So we'll sometimes refer companies to Maine Angels. I should note, almost all angel investors, they're looking for companies that have already started to scale up, that have revenue at least. Generally, angel investors wouldn't invest in a pre-revenue company. There's some exceptions, but you'll want to have at least be able to demonstrate at least that you have a product and you've got some traction. They're going to want to feel relatively confident. There's some other funding opportunities that are definitely worth mentioning that are kind of akin to what you described. So there's a variety of kind of pitch competitions in the state that there are opportunities to get funding from. So the
What
Maine
is it
Center
called?
pitch competitions.
Oh, all right.
So there's something called Top Gun, which is a program that ends in a pitch competition run by the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs. Gorham Saving Banks has a program they called Launchpad, which is a pitch competition. Maine Venture Fund has a program that they call the Start Summit, which is another pitch competition.
I'm trying to write this. Say that last one again.
I can include these in the follow-up email.
If you include those and I can email
Oh, all
these to
right.
you.
Okay.
Another one is Greenlight Maine. Folks might have seen that. I think it's airing on PBS. That's also a pitch competition, and it's great because you get to be on TV, and then the winner takes home, I think it's like $25,000. So there's definitely some good opportunities to pitch your business and receive funding that way. So that's I guess kind of how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, but when you do that, don't you when you put your idea out there, that leaves option for a competition to grab it too, right? Or not?
It's always a risk. Yeah. I mean, definitely worth, before doing stuff like that, I would definitely recommend, speaking with a patent lawyer or, doing some research if it's, if you have something that can be protected by IP. but so much, in my experience, so much of the succeeding in these ventures is less about the idea itself and more about the execution.
Mhm.
A lot of ideas have already been had by other people, but you just are the one doing it better. So, because ultimately, at the end of the day, at some point, you're going to have to let your idea out there. At some point, people are going to find out what you're doing just by the nature of selling your product.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is to a degree a risk, and you want to be kind of smart about when you decide to kind of go public. And it
Mhm.
depends a lot on the industry and what the product is and
Who do
how
you
much
trust, though?
secrecy.
Who do you trust when you want
Right.
to come and speak with your confidant or whatever about your business idea? Because I do
Well,
think it's an
score.
awesome idea.
Yeah, I mean, score is something I'd recommend. And Jasper, you're all signed to confidentiality agreements, I assume, or something of
Yeah,
that nature.
every score mentor is completely confidential. And Kathy, I know you
Mhm.
do have a mentor, so
Yeah.
obviously keep in touch with them.
Mhm.
And that being said, I can reiterate what Tom said. I mean, in this day and age, as soon as you get out there, I'm sure that there may be some similar businesses in business, but if you're offering a unique slant on it, I'm sure that it'll help in your success.
I
I
think
should also
so.
mention just quickly that Maine Technology Institute, all of us are also signed to very vigorous confidentiality agreements as well. So if you speak to an MTI representative about your idea, there are legal protections in place to ensure that that stays confidential and won't kind of go
Okay.
out there. And as you can imagine, that's very important for businesses applying to MTI. Often they do have, intellectual property or things of that nature. So we're all signed. Anybody who would see your application materials are all signed to those sorts of confidentiality agreements.
Okay. I would like to talk to an MTI person.
Great. Yeah. So
Great.
I would recommend, Kathy, that you just go on our website and go to that interest form. That if you go to Business Innovation Funding and go to that interest form, just there's a couple small questions, name, telephone, the like, and that'll let you set up a conversation with one of us.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Perfect. And yeah, we do have a few score clients in the Launchpad competition this year. I believe that the final presentation is next month, hosted at USM. So it's exciting to see a few people I recognize there.
That's great.
Uh, yeah, either way, do we have any more questions? Always some great topics to cover. We greatly appreciate what you do, Tom, and
I
the
got one
MTI's
more.
involvement. All right.
I got
Go
one
ahead.
more. Do you have a list of lawyers that for patent lawyers?
I
Or
have
do you
Score
help with
does.
that?
Kathy, I can send you Score's recommendation, but Tom, if you do have any specifics you recommend, feel free.
No, all I was going to mention is going back to that Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program that I had mentioned, the consulting program. As part of our database, we do include, IP lawyers. So you could talk. I'm not part of the Merck program, but if you go on our website and select Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps, you could get connected to the woman who manages that, and that would be an option as well. But it sounds like Score has a list as well, so probably worth getting both of those.
Yeah, sounds like it. Thank you.
All righty. And one last chance. Any other questions, everyone? I know we're wrapping things up a little early, but it's always a great presentation by Tom.
Mhm. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Kathy.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, and with that, just wanted to reiterate, we did record today's presentation, so it'll be sent out momentarily. And I want to thank everyone for attending today, and thanks again, Tom, for presenting. We will be sending out, along with the slides and recording, a brief survey that we really appreciate if you would fill out. And if you don't already have a SCORE mentor, you can apply for one for free at score.org. Just fill out the short form telling us what your business is and what questions you have. And as we said during the conversation, it's free and completely confidential. SCORE is a nonprofit partner of the SBA, and we're located nationwide. So if we don't have the resources you need here in Maine, I'm sure we have a mentor throughout our network that does. And thanks again for Tom and the MTI for sponsoring and putting on this presentation. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Thanks.